for hosting this conference. As you may have noticed arriving, the downtown location is the perfect hub for exploring Boston's innovation ecosystem and learning from industry leaders. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the entire greater Boston and New England startup community, all industries, all startup departments, and all bootstrapped and funding stages for 5 straight days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer, and the folks working the conference today here are volunteering their time as well. So thank you for attending this conference. It is a labor of love, and we appreciate you all playing a role in shaping our startup community. I would also like to give a huge thank you to Tech CXO for sponsoring this morning's session. Startup Boston Week could not happen without the support of our awesome partners like them. Thank you again so much for attending this week, and now on to the session.
Take it away.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Elena. Good morning. My name is Ann Walsh, and I am very excited to talk about being a powerhouse fractional talent. So, as I said, my name is Ann Walsh. I am the founder of Thrive HR, and I am proud to say that I've worked at 31 startups as a leader in fractional work. So I wanted to introduce my panelists. These are phenomenal people, and I'm going to start off with Shireen.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Shireen Shaheen. My professional background is in product marketing. I've been in product marketing about 12 years now, and I worked in-house at a couple different B2B SaaS companies in the Boston area, and then I started my own consultancy 5 years ago now, so in 2019. So I work with individual clients now on various product marketing initiatives and projects. And can you guys hear me? I was told to speak like right into the, okay. And then I'll pass to Andy.
All right. It's like a press conference here with this thing. Yeah. Hi, I'm Andy. I am currently a partner at an organization called Haven Human Asset Ventures. And we are the people that you call if you've got any kind of leadership development challenge, or you want to invest in your people, or if you need some HR advice and fractional support, which is what we do. My career has been, recently I've joined this consulting fractional world about 18 months ago. Prior to that, I spent almost, I like to say more than 20 instead of 25. That sounds better, but a very long time in biotech. That's where I spent most of my time in a range of executive leadership roles. So I'm loving this work and excited to share what you can get out of it as well.
Hi, I'm the short one. So, hi, my name is Grace DeCatch. I am also an HR professional like Andy and Ann. I've started in many larger organizations, consumer products, communications, publishing, and then over the course of time, shifted my career towards biotech. I've traditionally been more of an in-house person. I've always seen myself as like the in-house HR person. But over the last year, given the dynamics of biotech, I actually made a concerted effort and decision to take a chance and try the fractional work. There's a lot of opportunity in our industry. I'm also an entrepreneur. My husband and I own a business. So I can understand the dynamics of particularly early stage companies when you're really trying to spend as little as possible, but get as much as you can out of the organization. So happy to share that perspective. And I've been just independently consulting with several clients through networking. And so I can speak to the business development aspect of fractional work.
Okay. And hi, I'm Chris Selland. I'm a partner in the executive operations practice at TechCXO. I can explain what exec ops is in a minute. But first of all, on behalf of TechCXO, I do want to just say how excited we are to sponsor this event and, help support this event and the startup community in Boston and greater New England. So really, really happy to be here. TechCXO is headquartered in Atlanta. For what it's worth, there's about 120 of us partners. We do have about 15 partners in the Boston area. We're probably best known as we used to be known as Tech CFO, fractional CFOs, and probably like 12 of the 15 or so are CFOs. I am not. But anyway, my background is mostly software, SaaS, fintech, and a little bit of hardware as well. I've been with a lot of startups, although not 31, but probably a dozen or so, including and some startups that have been acquired by bigger companies over the years. And it kind of came up in sales, marketing, business development, and then I've been a 3-time CEO. Last but not least, I'm also teaching entrepreneurship at Northeastern for the first time this fall. So speaking with a lot of sort of would-be and wannabe entrepreneurs, another type of giving back, which is a lot of work, but a lot of fun as well. So happy to be here.
What an impressive panel here. I am lucky to be in your presence. I love this. So I am very excited about talking about fractional work and what does fractional leadership mean. And this is for founders that are interested in bringing people in, when to bring them in, what does it mean? How do you integrate? We're going to talk about all of that. And then we're also going to talk to people and talk with people that are interested in getting into this profession. How do you get in? What are the pros and cons? So we're going to talk from both sides. So basically, what I'd love to just start it off. Let's start it off easy. What exactly is fractional leadership and how does it differ from traditional full-time leadership roles?
Who's looking at me? All right, I'll start. Well, first of all, the simplest definition is fractional is part-time. However, getting a little more detailed than that, because that would be a pretty boring panel. Part-time can mean a lot of things. And I would say, for those of us who, and I'll speak mostly for myself, not speak for the other panelists, kind of chose to go fractional, it's because we really want to work with a variety. I spent a lot of my career in one company and focused on one thing, and you should probably hear from my bio. Now I'm doing a bunch of things, and I kind of like it that way. I like having a portfolio of projects, clients that I work on, and my firm is all about, people who kind of want to do fractional as a career. In other words, it's not necessarily a way station until I find my next job. Not that there's anything wrong with that. A lot of people do that, and that's fractional too. But there's different types of fractional, and I guess I'll stop there and let other people jump in.
I think the only thing I'll add to that is typically I've seen with the word fractional is, this could be up for debate, is that they tend to be more leadership roles. So coming in more at a C level, perhaps SVP, VP, and so forth. And why I differentiate that is as a consultant. So I've both done that in product marketing leadership roles. If there was a leader that was either let go or they just had an interim gap, I was brought in for that. However, the term consultant, I guess we'll use, I've also come in for a contract, like a project. So you're part of it, maybe an existing team, they need some extra hands. So not necessarily a leadership role in that case. So I think that's one way I've even tried to differentiate what does this word fractional mean, is I tend to see it more on that leadership side, but I'm also curious if that's what others have seen.
That's a good segue to the next question too. What levels do you typically see?
I was going to maybe just say one quick thing on what is fractional. I had maybe a slightly different perspective. I don't particularly love the word fractional because it almost makes it sound like I've got spent a little time with you, a little bit of time with you, and I don't really care much about all of you, already, which is not what we're saying at all. So I think if fractional work is done very well, there's no distinction. Like you would look at that person and say, well, yeah, they're part of my company. They care just as much about what's happening here as anybody else, and they're just as engaged as anyone else. So I think particularly the people on this panel and others that I've seen that do really, really well, you wouldn't even know the difference. It's all behind the scenes, like the fractional piece.
Right. The thing I noticed that was different is I always tell people, because I come in as part of your team. I am typically your head of HR. I come in as part of your team, building your culture. I just get paid differently. And that's the only difference.
Yeah.
People, and a lot of times employees don't even know that I'm fractional, it's great. I love it. I love being part of the team. What common levels do you see that are typically at a fractional? And we don't really care for that term. So if somebody else wants to throw out another term, we'll use that as well.
I mean, I think to that point, fractional is a label that's come in vogue over the last couple of years. In a more traditional sense, it is a consultant of sorts. And again, it could be someone that's there temporarily for a period of time as an organization's trying to figure out the full scope of the role, or it could be because they have needs, but they know that it's not going to be a full-time need. So they don't want someone sitting around twiddling their thumbs because they're resource constrained. And so I think to that point, in terms of the level, where I've seen it come in, and this is more in biotech, which again, over the last years has been even more risk adverse in bringing on headcount, is that it's we need someone who's an expert in regulatory. Those people are really hard to find from a full-time perspective, and if you make the wrong hire, it can be really tough to sort of backtrack. So, but they have the need right now, but they may not have the luxury of time to actually go out and source for that perfect candidate. So I do find that it tends to be with roles where like they know they have the need, they may not know exactly what that need is, and they actually want that person to come in and give some guidance. So it may be someone more experienced who's seen a couple different things and can apply their skills to their organization.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's usually you're looking for senior experience that, you need the experience. You want somebody who can hit the ground running, but you don't necessarily need it full time.
Mhm.
I would say in the startup world, there's a couple places it's quite well accepted. I mentioned CFOs. Fractional CFO is definitely a thing in the startup world. Fractional CRO or CHRO, I should say, is witnessed by the fact we have 3 HR fractional folks up here. I would say marketing. Some other areas not as much. Like I'm essentially a fractional CEO, which is a little weird concept, particularly for like investors, unless your name's Elon, I guess. But it's getting accepted across the board. And our firm exclusively focuses, as the name might suggest, on C-level. Doesn't have to be C-level, but the idea is you need somebody more senior experience, can hit the ground running, get the job done, but you don't necessarily need them 40, 50, 60 hours a week, like many startups would want to hire somebody full time. So that's where it
And
fits.
I'll add, as others are saying, that experience piece, I really like that, because not only to hit the ground running fast, but you're usually not there a very long time. I mean, sometimes it could be a year. Sometimes I've come in for 3 months. So you have a pretty short window to ramp up, understand the business, meet the right people you need to meet, figure out kind of the lay of the land. So you need, I don't know how many years, but you need some level of experience before that to be able to just kind of have some of those skills of what to do when you come in. So I give a lot of credit to the 12 years I did in-house work before I even started this.
Yeah, I think that's key. I would just to build on that these companies are almost paying for the mistakes that you've made or things that you've learned or things that you've seen not work in other companies, so that you can come in and, as you said, just jump right in and get up to speed really quickly.
Right. I found that you can give them, as we said, the cliff notes of it. I know when the inflection points of people going from specialist, when they're generalist in startups, they're generalist going to becoming specialists in the communication that goes around that and the pitfalls, things that you really need to watch out for. And that could ruin your culture if you don't make sure that you manage that. So people hire me for that experience.
Yeah.
And I do believe you have to have some credibility out there, and you've paid your dues working your way up in your craft. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing, by the way, I'll throw out, because our firm uses this, we also do interim, which is a little bit different and like a use case for interim in a startup. So interim means we need somebody right away, maybe full time, but and oftentimes the case is either something happened, there was a resignation, or we're doing a search. It's a really important search, like a head of sales. And this actually could be where you might use an interim CEO as opposed to a fractional CEO. We're looking for a new CEO. It's a heavy duty search, but we also need somebody to come in and just run the business. And so we'll bring somebody in on an interim basis. So interim often gets thrown around interchangeably with fractional as well. It's slightly different, but it's very related. So
But you're right. Interim could be full-time.
yeah, an interim could be full time, but it usually means you're going to work yourself out of a job at some point. Pre-search or resignation is oftentimes where you see that, or health issue or those types of things. Like I did have one where it was unfortunately due to somebody had a stroke and they needed somebody to keep the company running. And so, it turned into a very quick interim thing that thankfully he recovered. So I was able to kind of move on, but just helping out.
And sometimes they're both, and you don't even know.
Yes.
I mean, you start off as fractional, and then you're like, oh, now I'm interim, and then it just kind of morphs as you go along. So I think that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
I
I would worry less about the terms. As you can see, the terms are like,
Right.
Exactly.
they've confused me for 5 years. So it's more like there's an expert, you come in, you're typically not full-time, typically short period of time coming in for some support a company needs. I mean, if I had to like oversimplify, that's how I would do it.
How can founders determine if their business would be beneficial from fractional or interim help?
I would say, having spoken to a lot of executives over the last year in my own business development, a lot of it's just having conversations with people in the field, talking to your peers in similar roles or similar industries to try to get a sense of what can they expect. There are a lot of first-time founders, and so they don't have a playbook, so they're trying to build it, and so they're creating their own sort of personal board of directors. I'd say also, I've had a lot of people just talk to me. I'm an HR professional. They don't know HR, so they're trying to figure out, and I'm coaching them and guiding them, helping them figure out. And I enjoy those conversations, even if they don't turn into work, because I think ultimately we're still doing the same type of providing the same value. We're advising these founders on how to think about the function that they may see a gap in. They don't know all the details behind it, nor should they, nor do you want them to get into it, but they need to know enough about and how do they value that function? How do they think that's going to apply to the business needs that they have?
Yeah, and I think if you're a founder or a senior leader in one of these types of companies, I think you have to ask yourself, like, all right, what am I really great at, and what can I uniquely bring to this business? And if the answer to that question is I'm doing stuff like way outside of that, and I'm not using myself in the highest and best use, then that's the time to bring in someone on a fractional basis. If you're spending all your time thinking about HR topics and you're trying to build a software company, like, that's a problem. So it's a little bit of like self-reflection of, like, where are you spending your time, and then figuring out how to bolster yourself so that you can spend it where it's most valuable.
Yeah, I love that. Only thing I would add too is if you are a founder who feels they have an idea for a new role, but you're still debating if you need it, if it needs to be full-time, you are validating some of the priorities for that role. I think a fractional or intern person is great for that as a little bit of a like beta test that you're doing. And that's okay with us who come in fractional. Like, we know that, we expect that. So for that, that's another use case I think would be great.
Yeah. Also, a lot of it is being self-aware of what type of founder you are and realizing what you're good at and what you may not be as good at. And it might make sense to go get somebody. A very common scenario is a technical founder or a product founder, or somebody who, kind of created the product, invented the tech, but doesn't know anything about marketing. Now you can go hire a marketing person, but if you're resource constrained, you might want to consider bringing a fractional marketing person, somebody more senior who's kind of been there, done that before, because they'll kind of know what to do on day one, as opposed to having to train somebody. You might be able to afford a more junior full-time person, but it might make sense to bring in a fractional, more senior person in that scenario, because, you raise the money's in the bank, and the investors are expecting, revenue to start growing. You need marketing ASAP. That kind of use cases oftentimes where fractional fits.
Great.
Yep.
What advice would you give an apprehensive founder looking to bring in, fractional talent?
I feel like I can relate as a business owner. My husband and I talk about this a lot, because we talked about this when we were starting our company and whether or not we wanted to bring in investors. And I do recognize that there's a degree of control that you tend to give up, whether it's financially with investors or if you're bringing someone on. So again, to the point of both Andy and Chris, knowing what you're good at and where your gaps are, I think that, but recognizing, like, there's a control factor, but there's also, like, how much do you actually know? And are you going to benefit from other people who have a very distinct perspective that you don't have and you can't get by reading a lot of books? And so, that's why I advise my husband on HR, but I let him handle the payroll because he's still the employee there.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I mean, I will just say I've spoken to so many founders, whether they were ready to hire or not yet, just to hear our perspective. Just be open to the conversation. You might not even be ready to hire someone fractional for another year, but we all love having, I'm sorry, I don't remember if it's Andy or Chris, but just the advisory conversations. Just we can just chat with you for 30 minutes and share what our experience is like, and that may help you in thinking through, is this the right thing for you? So don't hesitate to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people in these roles will be willing to share some, free advisement up front. Again, they want you to be successful as a business owner. They also want to make sure, again, it doesn't have to land in a transaction between the two of you, because they may realize that, I'm not the best person for you. And I've said that to many leaders, that, like, but I think this person would be. And I think that's the other, the ability to talk to one person. It just expands your network to people that you may not know. I would purposely push yourself as a founder to push outside of your comfort zone, because again, you'll benefit from the diversity of thought from other people outside.
And I've seen the folks that I've seen that do this work, folks on this panel and others, I think, are used to apprehensive founders and apprehensive leaders. And that's kind of what you're bringing us in for, is to navigate those types of challenges. And some of it is just being able to relate to the person and bring them along and understand their business and meet them where they're at, as opposed to coming in like, all right, here's what we're going to do, and force them to do something. So I think a good fractional leader understands that there's a bit of give and take here as part of this relationship building process.
And fractional can be de-risking as well too, because the nice thing about fractional generally is it's a much bigger risk to go hire somebody full time. Because if it doesn't work out, then it's just harder to exit from. And as opposed to usually with fractional, again, I won't speak for everybody, but like our model is, you can you can talk to us today, bring us on tomorrow, and if you don't like it on day 3, you can say goodbye. This isn't working, right? So it's a little less risky in some ways if you think about it that way.
Yeah.
Because if it's something important enough, you feel like you need senior experience in the organization, hit the ground running, and you can end it much more easily than you could by, say, going for a full-time hire.
Yeah. Easy breakup.
Easy breakup. That's
Yeah,
really
easy
good.
breakup. There you go.
That's really good. And so we talked a little bit here about the risks. What are the other risks about bringing on for founders? What would be a risk of bringing somebody in to your team?
I mean, I don't know if this is a risk, but I think something for founders to be also mindful of. One hand is being really clear about your priorities, yes, but the other is this person is likely not full-time. So keep that in mind, that you can't necessarily treat them as full-time and give them a full plate of work and expect they're going to succeed in all of that. So just have realistic expectations. So I guess the risk is they may not live up to your expectations if your expectations are super high around the time commitment they're going to give. Like the most I've given to one client is 20 hours. That's the highest. Just because we need a variety of clients. You never want to put all your eggs in one basket. So that's the nature of our work that we have to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a real risk. I mean, I know that at least one person, organization I'm working with now, I mean, they slack me all the time as if I'm like there ready to respond, and I'm not. And so part of it is like I have to be just not respond and stick to the boundaries that I set. Like I will get back to you in X number of hours if that's whatever we agreed upon. So that's definitely a thing that can be challenging. I think the other thing from a founder or leader perspective is just knowing like how much other stuff does your fractional person have going on. So if I was a leader, I want to know, do you have 50 clients and I'm one of 50, or do you have 5? Like where do I fit in the brain space? Like I get it that you can bill all these folks potentially, but how much brain space do you actually have? So, I think that's an important conversation if I were in the founding seat or executive seat that I'd want to understand.
Yeah, I get that question. They ask me that.
I find that a lot of times you are an advisor to them, telling them what they need at what time of their evolution of their business. Many times I talk to people, they don't even know people like me exist out there, that they hire you to come in and then you realize quickly that they need somebody full-time. That's just not what I want. Or as you talked about timing, I worked at a company one time and I loved them and I was there the whole time. I was there for 3 years, 40 hours. It was like I was a full-time employee. Big mistake on my part, because when it ended, needed to restart my business. But I loved that experience. I got to see a lot and working with, a phenomenal team. But it's hard, as we talked about, it's a breakup.
Yeah.
And that's we'll talk about that when we talk about getting into being fractional, the things that you need to work through. But as a founder, I think that this is just such a great opportunity to bring somebody in at a level that you probably couldn't afford if you were hiring full-time, but you get that expertise and you do have them on speed dial when you do have an emergency, especially in the HR function. There are always bad behaving employees that keep me gainfully employed because you don't know what you don't know. Or I find that as a person as in HR, they tend to come late. You hire an HR person at last. You should probably hire them, not a full-time person, but you should hire a consultant or an advisor, even a couple of hours a week. You need somebody on speed dial because there's all kinds of craziness that goes on, even between two founders. I have had that experience. What strategies can founders use to effectively integrate a fractional leader into their existing team and culture?
I mean, I would say clarity with the team to some degree. I do have one client where they kind of think of me almost as full-time, although they realize I'm not, but my role's been kind of, because I have kind of one heavy client and then where I'm actually the interim president of the company and it's more of an interim than a fractional role. But but people sort of think of me as full time. But I think just being clear with the team on what this person's here for, what they do, and there may be meetings that they need to miss. And then the other thing, which isn't really the integration into the team question, is what kind of like revenue model or billing model, or like what's the financial model? Because that's a whole other area, but that's also where you need clarity, because what will happen is then people will start calling the fractional person if they're sitting there billing by the hour. You have to be careful of those kind of things. You have to be cognizant. So, but that's another conversation. So I'll stop there for now. We can go back to that part later.
I think it relates. I think what we're all saying is, managing expectations up front and being really clear about the scope of work. In some ways, I was brought on as in a fractional role, and the onboarding wasn't there, right? Obviously, they didn't have as much HR, so it's like I had to do that for myself. But I think you could bring in people to help you, and consultants that will help you and give you advice, and then step away and let you implement. But if you're going to bring on someone fractional, I think there's typically a little bit more like table stakes where you really want to partner with them, and so you want to give them the information that they need to be successful. Granted, you're also hiring them because you expect them to have a certain level of expertise. But I think really understanding the scope of work and understanding where there may be gaps and investing a little time to get them to understand, like, okay, how does this organization operate? How can you be effective, right? Because you don't want them to be spinning their wheels, billing out on all this time when they're not effective, when you could have probably addressed it up front in like the intro to the team, like, fractional people that, we brought on someone who was brought on as a consultant, and there was a recognition that that person was going to be very involved with the employees. We don't just hide them in a corner and say, like, this is the person on speed dial. Like, they write a number of introductions. Again, it depends on what the role is, depends on the scope of work ultimately.
Yeah, I fully agree with everything there. Typically, I try whenever I start with a new client, so I'll share that perspective, but it relates to the founder knowing this too, is I position the first couple weeks always as discovery and onboarding. And we have to lead that a little bit as the fractional person, but I always ask, what are the resources I need? Just throw them in a folder, send them all to me based on the scope of the work that I have in front of me. And then who are my people? Like, who is the core team? Depends on the size of the company, of course. If the company is just 6 people, then it's probably everybody. But let's say it's a larger company a little bit. Like, who are the 5 or 6 people that really care about this work? They're my key stakeholders. I'm going to make sure to meet with them. And you do become pretty embedded. Like Anne, you said, like we aren't full time, but when you do things like that, my goal is always, I want the company to feel I'm embedded. Like, that's an important value to me. We're not responding every minute to Slack, but we want to feel like we're a part of it, and just set that tone from the beginning.
So I think we have people here that are founders, and also we have people that are very interested in becoming fractional leaders. I know that we have some people online as well. So I'd like to shift the conversation to talk about our businesses that we have. What skills and experience are most valuable for somebody looking to become a fractional or a consultant? Anybody?
Well, somebody mentioned a playbook before, and I think that's a key skill. And it could be different kinds of playbooks. Like, it could be a fundraising, capital raising playbook. It could be a marketing playbook, sales, product, HR. But if you feel like you've kind of done things over and over, you have a way of doing. Now, you have to be careful, because sometimes you can get in trouble because the playbook doesn't always quite fit the business. There's an investor named Robert Smith. I always think of him. Some of you may know, he's pretty well known. He founded Vista Equity Partners, but he was quoted one time saying, "SaaS companies taste like chicken," which basically means they kind of all run the same. And I think, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, there's some truth there. So if you've run marketing for a SaaS company, you know how to run marketing for a SaaS company. That might be a good area to put your kind of flag out and say, I'm a fractional marketing leader for SaaS companies. So the playbook, I think, would be where it'd start.
Yeah, and I think maybe implied in the playbook is you've got some level of experience and some, some number of years. I don't know what the right number is or what the right level of experience is, but I do think because of the nature of the work that we've talked about, I think you have to have some solid grounding to stand on to be able to come in and do these roles effectively.
Yeah, and it also, there's lots of skills I think I could name, but when you become a fractional leader, consultant, whatever the word, not only are you, of course, an expert in your field and you're doing that work, but you're also running a business. And I think that gets forgotten pretty easily, or we underestimate that. It's like, we have to do biz dev. I have to be at events. I have to meet founders. I just have to. This is like my livelihood. It's my business. So keeping that in mind, that it's not always roses and working with clients, that is super fun and my favorite part of it. And I don't love the biz dev stuff. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's just not my favorite thing to do. So yeah, keep that in mind as well.
I
There
think
are
so.
a lot of challenges that come with running, being a person that does the work and also running your business. As you said, I do not like marketing. The word marketing makes me sweat. I just don't understand it. I'm great at out there talking to people, meeting people, but doing the marketing and getting people to know about you is difficult.
Part of it, yeah.
And let's talk about how you go about getting your clients. I think that would be something that's interesting to people that are looking to get into this business.
I was just going to add on that I think individuals who pursue this route probably have an inherent curiosity and want to challenge themselves. And so I would also say having a sense of what your risk threshold is as
Right.
well, because it is sort of mostly on you unless you associate with a firm. There are different models of engaging in this. Like, I'm independent, but I've definitely looked into whether or not there are consortiums of independents. There are also larger companies that do this. So there are different risk tolerances for that. But I think leading into curiosity in terms of business development, I've talked to some people recently and like, how did you get started? Like, how did you get clients? I'm like, and I said, I like to network. And I know some people find that's a very nerve-wracking term. People will say like, I'm an introvert, I don't like to network. And I encourage them to think about it as being curious about what are these people doing and just learning about new people. And again, it's easy, start small, start with people that you know in your industry, in your area that you have an expertise, but push yourself outside that boundary slowly, at whatever pace that you're comfortable with, because like Annie and I can relate. We know a lot of the same people in the same field, and same with Anne. It's like very incestuous, so to speak. But we all have different abilities that we're going to bring to people. So yes, we have our microcosm, but to push yourself out of that microcosm can also challenge you again, also in terms of finding clients that you may not have ever uncovered. I kind of think of it as like dating sometimes. If like people don't know that you're like looking for business, they're not going to help you. So I just put it out there and say, I'm looking, to do some more work. Do you know anybody? And again, be open to having those conversations. It's going to be a long game. Oftentimes those conversations, you're going to get a lot of rejections, but I think you're also going to learn a lot about how do you want to position yourself as a consultant or fractional and your business, and where do you provide the value? And then how can you, position that competitive advantage to your potential clients?
Yeah, one of the really fundamental decisions, if you say, yeah, I want to do this, or even if you say I want to try it, is do I do it on my own? And what we sometimes refer to as single shingle,
Ooh.
or single shingle is something I hear it all the time in our firm. Or do you want to join a bigger firm? And there's pros and cons to each approach. I would say if you want to put your toe in the water and you're not sure you're going to like it, kind of staying independent, but then you do have to do all the other work, the billing and collect the mail and go to the bank and all that stuff, and build the website and a lot of the stuff I don't have to do. The downside of joining a bigger firm is that it's not a downside, but our partners, because we're a partnership, we basically give up a percentage of our billing, and I can't be super precise about that, but it's a pretty good deal to pay for all that stuff. So we have people who do that. It's kind of like, we're kind of structured like a law firm in that respect. And, but there's all different models. There's a lot of fractional firms out there if you want to join a firm. Again, as I said earlier, I can't speak for all of them. Like ours, we're looking for people who know they want to do this and know they want to stay in it, because once you're in a partnership and you've got other partners looking out for you and you're looking out for other partners and you're bringing people in, you want to know that person's not going to like take a full-time job, or at least unless it's an amazing job. Sometimes there's an understanding, but generally speaking, it's discouraged. And there's actually clauses in our agreement that, if clients really want to hire our fractional people, they can, but it's going to cost, because ideally we are just trying to stay fractional. So anyway, I could go a long way down that path, but the fundamental decision of do I want to join a firm or do I want to do it on my own is a big one. And like I said, if you're not sure, I do think staying on your own is a better path, at least to start. So.
Yeah, and I've recently just gone through that. So about 18 months ago, left the inserial full-time world. And so initially started doing work on my own and quickly realized two things. One, I don't like hanging out by myself in my house and just doing this as a team of one. So that was one thing. And I think two, also quickly realized you hit a threshold of like, there's just only so much one person can do. And as others are saying, like, you have to then still think about business development and all this other stuff. Like there's just not enough time. So you quickly hit a hours and revenue threshold. So for me, the decision was fairly easy at that point. Like, I want to join a firm. And I want to join because I want to be able to work with people. I want to be able to leverage what they've already built. And I want to be able to sell other things so that I can leverage my time to the things that I really want to spend my time on. So I joined as a partner, and all the same things that Chris just talked about is part of it. So yes, you give up some financials on individual assignments, but you gain a whole bunch of other things. So for me, that math made sense. For others, it'll be a different decision. And then maybe just pick up on one thing that Grace was talking about with respect to networking and getting out there. The best advice I got was like pick one thing that you really like to do and you can do all the time and do that. So do I love coming to big events and networking? Like, it's not my most favorite thing, but I'm happy to write and post and be online and do all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to get really good at doing that and be there every day. As opposed to picking something like, it's going to be a slog. Like, I'm not going to do it. So that was the best advice I got, is pick one thing that you're really good at, become like great at it, and just be there all the time.
Yeah, I love that. I think as far as your question, finding new clients, I fully agree with what Andy said. I mean, people say, oh, do you do like cold emails or message people, founders cold? And I personally don't. I know some that have seen success with that and they build relationships that way. I just don't like doing that. It's the reason I didn't work in sales. But what I do enjoy doing is building like solid relationships and authentic relationships. I don't like the word networking either, but just go out there. If you meet one or two people at an event, that's all my goal is usually. Have a really good conversation with them. You absolutely never know where that's going to lead to. And I've had clients come from some of those conversations. So pick the thing. It doesn't have to be an event. It doesn't have to be posting on LinkedIn all the time, but pick the thing you're comfortable with and clients will come. And I think the hardest is your first couple clients.
Right.
Once you have those, word of mouth, hopefully you do great work because you're an expert. And through word of mouth, client referrals, I've had people go from one client to a new company and they've brought me on. So it can not easy. I'm just saying it can start to go from there.
Yeah. I've owned my business now for 9 years. And if you learn one thing from me, just take it. At first, when I started in this, I got out of just being a full-time HR person. I worked at large company and small company. So when I first started my business, I did everything. I took it all, did it all, burnt myself out. I love the startup world. I am startup all the way now. I do not work with large companies. I do get calls. I'm not interested. I refer them to other people. And that's what's other thing is great about being in this network. You have networks. And having a fractional person like myself is great. It's small. We're small business. We're really nimble. Working with another company and you could possibly go to a larger firm and you could get more expertise. There is something for everyone here. You just have to know your lane and what you're good at. And we talked about building relationships, and I'll tell you, it really does mean a lot. I actually yesterday got a call from somebody I haven't talked to in 10 years. I worked with them 10 years ago, and they're like, hey, and we're starting a new company. We wanted to see if you'd be interested in something like this. I was very excited. So you never know where you're going to meet, but know your elevator pitch, what it is, what you're good at, and also know to outsource some things. Like I have to outsource my marketing now. I do the postings. I write my blogs and things like that, but I don't like the rest of it. I don't like the PR. So my marketing person is here today, but there are things that you can farm out. I have an accountant. So please, just another thing is make sure you have a good accountant. But
yeah, and I think those, maybe to build on that, the strategic relationships that you build are important. So thinking about who the adjacent people and capabilities to what you do, and like build a relationship with them, because they can be really important relationships. So CFOs are often seeing HR stuff. Good to know some CFOs, right? Business I have, we do leadership coaching as well as HR advising. Those things sometimes very much go hand in hand. If you're doing fractional work as an HR leader, turns out there might be some executive coaching opportunities as well. So it's another way to think about building your business is to build those relationships around you.
And
Right.
there's so many, because this is all picked up so much in the last few years. There's so many more consultants, fractionals, all of it. There's a lot more support now. Even when I started 5 years ago, this was not as much of a thing. And through COVID and layoffs and all the things that have happened in the world, there's many more people doing this. So all that's to say, there's a lot more communities out there.
Yeah.
So many Slack groups. I mean, there's no shortage of resources if you're thinking of starting this.
And one other thing before we take questions, I want to ask one more question. Time management. That is a big critical factor here. Let's just talk about a little bit of time management. I don't really have a posed question, but let's just talk about that as a team.
It's
think
hard. It's hard. Yeah, go ahead, Grace.
It's definitely a skill you should have, some organization, depending on the number of clients. I mean, you could run your business or work with an organization at different levels. You could do more of a, retainer per month and for a period of time. I was doing hourly because I was starting out and I'm independent. It is a bear. So figuring out a tool that helps you manage the time just from a billing standpoint, but also for yourself. Like I tend to get a little ADHD when I look at my email. So I'm looking at 5 different emails. So I would specifically try to time block. I'm going to do emails for everybody in the morning, at night, but this day is for this client. And so I think there's certainly a discipline involved in managing multiple clients in that way.
Yeah, time management is definitely hard and definitely an acquired skill. And I think I've been doing it long enough now that I'm starting to feel comfortable. I'd say, first of all, you're going to need a shared calendaring tool like Calendly. I really like this tool called Reclaim. The Dropbox actually just acquired the company. But because, I have like 3 or 4 different email addresses and 3 or 4 different calendars. And so it's tough, and it's something you got to get used to. And it seems like everybody always needs you for something critical at the exact same time. And that is one of the challenges for sure. So, but you'll get used to it once you do it for a while, but it's tough.
Right. And I, believe it or not, I looked at YouTube, and there was about how lawyers bill, and they deal with all their different clients. And I took a page out of their playbook on how to manage my clients. So there's a lot of.
Do you charge for emails too?
What?
Like
I
lawyers.
not really, and that's where you get scope creep on a lot of things. So time management is key. I wish I was better at it. I am getting better at it every day. So, and there are tools and tips and tricks out there that can help you manage your time. And because you want to deliver for your clients, that is the ultimate goal, is that we give the best service and that they're not even worried about HR. When they are working with me, they know that I have it under control. So I have to manage my time, and you can't overbill, but you also have to be true to yourself. So,
Yeah.
any other?
I mean, I would
anything
just, the
else?
last thing I would say on this is just we as business owners have to think the same way you do about if you were trying to fractional help for yourself. So what are you good at? What are you not? So, I brought in a virtual assistant. So it's relatively low dollars. It's a, set number of hours, and it's super helpful. Like I'm not good at that stuff. So just having someone who's like, hey, like you said, you were going to do this in this time. Like, why? Like, okay, you're right. You caught me. Like just that accountability, it gets worth like the certain number of dollars per hour.
So we're going to open it up now to questions, either online or in person. She's going to come over with the microphone.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emma Borison. I'm a data strategy consultant, or potentially fractional. Haven't figured out which term to use. I am building this consulting business, this year after being in corporate for 2 decades. And something that I'm struggling with, aside from the fact that data is not a common fractional concept, I'm trying to make it be, is clarifying my value. So many business and coaching experts recommend that you have like a pain point that you're solving for your client. But in so many cases, it seems like when you're a consultant or a fractional leader, you're sort of there's no one specific thing you're there to solve. You're advising, and you're doing giving lots of benefit. How do you clarify your value when it's not one specific pain point?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen two schools of thought on that, just like you mentioned. I've seen some say you need to have your niche or niche, or still don't know how to say that word, or not. And so I've never had like one specific focus area in product marketing. However, when I do meet with prospective clients, I'll say here are four of my focus areas. Typically, where my work falls into is this, 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 and this, and it gives them a sense of what you can do, but it leaves enough room, because then I'll always say each of these buckets have their own things and tasks, and it just gets the conversation started, and that's usually enough to go from there. And because I agree, I think if you get too specific, they might say, oh, but I don't need that thing, so I'm going to move on. So it's a balance.
Yeah, I would just add there's a distinction between filling a role and solving a problem. And obviously they're connected, but it's kind of how you position yourself based on what you want to do, right? Usually fractional is more about filling a role. We need a head of HR as opposed to solving a problem.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's somewhat related to how companies typically organize themselves. Certainly there are, you know, as Danielle knows, a lot of background in data. There are chief data officers out there, and, you know, organizations. There are data organizations is starting to be a thing, but it's certainly not as, you know, a CDO is not nearly as well established a role as a CFO, for instance, where every company has one essentially, and it's not just the C-level. So to some degree, whether you consider yourself more of a consultant or more of a fractional is whether you want to be more about solving the problem or filling the role. So.
Mhm.
I think to that point, you know, you are the product or the service that you're offering to your client, and it comes down to like, what's your why? And I've spent many times just thinking like, why? And it's the Simon Sinek, like, you know, ask yourself why 5 times. And the first time it's going to be like, well, because I just need to do this. And then like you sort of bring yourself up to a higher level. And I think that by going through that exercise yourself, you can, you know, articulate it for yourself, but then, you know, have the conversations with people, and you'll start to learn, you know, at what level are you really comfortable presenting your why? And, you know, like, oh, I'm here to solve the people issues, or I'm here to recruit, right? It's a very different why, but take the time to think about that for yourself. Like any job, like understanding that is really important for your happiness.
So this is actually very connected. How obviously scope creep is real,
Mhm.
as well as the need to further your business. How do you balance the I can do all the things with also needing to control what you are doing? Because if you try to do all the things, you'll end up failing at all the things. And also continuing growing your business, because saying no, there's always that fear that then they won't come to you again for things. Does that make sense? I feel like I didn't explain
Right.
that very well.
I don't say no. If there's a project that comes in and I cannot take it, I actually have a network of people that I can refer, and I know that they do great business. But I find my time best is when I time block for my clients, and it does work well. Like Mondays, I work one client only. They need me on Mondays. They've already dedicated that day. So I educate my clients and I tell them, unfortunately, I'd be happy to help you, but I'm not available on Mondays. And if that is a job that requires me to be on site or somewhere on Mondays, I cannot give my focus. So I don't take that client. I'll give somebody a call that's in my network that I know that is as capable as I am to do this, and refer that client in. So that's what I find helps a lot. But scope creep does happen. But if you are really good at the time blocking and looking at how you're billing in every half hour or so, writing it down, you will realize very quickly what you have available for time. But it can wreak havoc on all ends of your life if not.
Yeah.
Believe me, trust me on that.
I also think, I mean, do you also mean when you're in an engagement with a client? And okay, so yeah, yeah. There's so much more that, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So that definitely happens. I mean, I think just at the start of every engagement, what I always try to do is be as specific as possible. I know it's not easy in this, like my scopes are very detailed. Sometimes I feel like I give away the ideas like in my scope but I also am okay doing that because I'm laying out these are the deliverables you'll expect in the first month, month 2, month 3. So that at least gives you the guardrails. Definitely when you're in a client engagement, it's very common that there's other things that come up, and I personally am not hesitant to say, hey, that's not part of our original scope. Would you like to add that on? That's probably just a few hours more a week. Or we can wait a couple months. Maybe we tag it on if it's not a high priority once we complete these things. And the last idea I usually give is, do you want to deprioritize anything that we already had in our scope and bring this one on instead? Like, does this take more priority than what we agreed to a month ago? And sometimes it does, because things shift, and you also want to be flexible. So I do want to be flexible for my clients. And often between one of those, it works out.
Hello.
Question.
Good morning.
Can I give a question?
Yes, of course.
So just to introduce, my name's Michael. I'm a founder, 6-time, and varying successes. 1 public, 2 sales, and 3 crashes and burns. But now I'm a fractional. And my question to sort of you guys is, when I was a founder, I wished I had the opportunity desperately to have experienced talent who was on my team. Because one of the big lessons I learned was that starting up companies is a team activity. It's a team sport. This is not an individual thing. I don't think founders who do it themselves can really succeed. So my question to you guys is sort of 2 parts. One of the big hesitations that I've heard from a lot of founders that I've been speaking with is, are you a fractional or are you a consultant? Because I don't want to pay for somebody who's a consultant who's going to tell me what to do and then walk away. But a fractional, in my experience, is one who can be hands-on, right there, part of the team on day one. First question, do you agree with that? Second of all, like founders like me, how do we let more founders know that this is an option now? Because I see so many founders not even recognizing that this is a possibility in their lives, and they're trying to do it all themselves or with junior talent, et cetera. Suddenly there's this huge universe out there other than talks like this. How do we get the word out that fractionalism is a good answer for founders? So I'll let you guys answer.
Okay, I'm so glad you asked this question. This came up in our panel prep. And so I positioned myself as a consultant for 5 years. Again, the terms just bother me, but I do the work. So I always get a little, like, not annoyed, but a little bit annoyed when people are like, oh, you're a consultant, so you're just going to come in and tell us what to do and then you're going to leave. No. So when I say I'm a consultant, I do have 2 ways of working. I have an advisory format where it's a little bit more like that, and you pay less. You pay me less for less amount of hours, but I can come in and more advise, but I'm not getting hands-on into the work. Or I have an execution format, and in that format, I'm doing the work. So that's just where I guess I don't love the terms, but you're right. From, I guess, back in the day, or the stigma around consultants is they just come in and say the thing and they leave. But I don't think that's true anymore. I think a lot of people are doing the work right now.
Right. And I also saw, I'm the same way. I'm getting caught up in some of these newfangled words, which is fractional. I actually do the work. I come in, some clients I advise, some clients I actually do the work, or I'm on speed dial when they need me. But I do find that knowing that we're out there, it is difficult to find us. And I forgot what I was going to say. So how's that? To be honest, I'm old. So somebody else want to take that?
Just that I 1,000% agree, though. When it's fractional, the implication is you're doing the work. We can argue about consulting. Shireen and I did have a fun exchange
We had a
about
fun
that when we
debate
were
about
setting
it.
up the panel. So I said somebody would probably yell at me in the audience, and she yelled at me. But yeah, no, it's true. Consultant doesn't mean you don't do the work, but fractional absolutely means you're going to come in, get your hands dirty, dig in, and do stuff. So fully agree with that first statement.
As far as finding individuals who do this, again, it's, start with the center circles of your network. And I found that when I was looking for work, I was connecting more with like the people who are financing the organization. So kind of going to the earlier start of like the VCs and seeing how do they think about their people approach, or whatever their approach is to whatever function it is. And, the people pouring the money are going to have different strategies as well. So, there's certain companies that I'm like, they're not going to necessarily invest in people early. So I'm not even going to bother with their network. I'm going to focus on these companies because I know they're going to do that. And then again, like, push yourself outside of the your industry, because again, you just never know who knows someone. And it may not be that, I actually started getting involved in Underscore VC because they are also very broad, but they have a network as well. And so there are a lot of, I think, VCs and people who are investing in these organizations that are trying to create their own little mini networks. I think another company just created like in biotech, like an advisory network. And so if you just have to keep on asking, how can I, it's like when you network, it's like, well, and then who else? Like, and then where else should I go? Ask for that advice.
And there used to be a stigma about when I first started this business, used to be thinking that you're unemployed and only hanging your shingle to get a job.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. We are here as professionals. This is chosen. I feel that I have a lot of experience that I can share with a lot of small startups that can't afford somebody at my level. So it's great for me. And that's that's what I love. And when I see people getting into this consulting practice, they have something to offer. And if you have something to offer, don't hesitate to tell people about it. You're not bragging, you're offering advice and guidance. And it's just, and I find such pleasure in seeing the growth of my companies that I advise, and I get a lot from it. So if you have something that's unique that you feel that somebody else could use, let them know. And it's not being braggadocious. You're out there, but you also need to make money for it. And that's the other thing. People will always call you for free advice, and everybody wants the friends and family discount. And even when they get Vestor funded, people tend to try to call. And then I say, this is part of my business. This is what I do. And this is how I get paid. And believe it or not, when you do know your worth, people do rise to the occasion and pay you for it. So don't hesitate. Yes.
I was wondering, in terms of the founder perspective of making a decision between fractional and hiring somebody full-time, what are some cases where fractional is the wrong decision? And like a founder came to you with a scope of work and you said, you shouldn't hire me. You need to go and do the hiring process and hire somebody full-time.
I would say, and it's funny, I was going to comment on Grace brought up VCs, and sometimes if it's a longer term kind of role, like sales is probably a good example. You might want, your head of sales is eventually going to ramp up to full-time. You're going to want a full-time head of sales. That might be more of a fit for an interim head of sales if you need somebody to take it over while you're looking for the perfect head of sales. But like for a venture-backed company, usually the VCs are going to want you to get a full-time person. They're not going to want you to get a fractional person. They're going to want somebody who's kind of all in, gets on planes. The prospect can see you when the prospect can see you. You can't time block your hours. So there's certain types of roles, and I'd say the ones that are more set up long-term longitudinally are probably the ones you eventually might want to bring on a full-time hire. But again, it doesn't mean like, you're going to want to have HR full-time eventually as well too. It doesn't mean you can't use fractional while you're ramping up to that point. So I don't know if I answered the question very well, but it is also connected to investor expectations to some degree.
But we also help you find candidates. Like if
Correct.
you come in and then I'm working with you and you're outgrowing me, I will help you find the right HR person for your company. I want you to succeed. My brand is already attached to your brand because you're my client. So I want to make sure that we find the right person for you. And many times I found that technical, like engineers, I'm not sure, I don't know, because you run a bigger company than I do. I don't see that as fractional. Like we don't have a fractional,
Right.
The technology is typically not something that you bring a fractional leader in for.
Yeah, it's fine. That's what I was trying to say, the nature of the role, because
Yeah.
by definition, HR is helping you build the organization, so that, and eventually you might work yourself out of a job. But yeah, an engineer might be another example where you want, that domain expertise, that knowledge, their mind share not to be divided between multiple clients because you really want them all in on your problem. So it depends on the role.
I think if it's core to your business, you want to invest in someone and you want someone to invest in you too. So I think that's the way to think about it. Is that your advantage? Is that like technical and scientific? Like, yes, you can have them, but if that's like really what's going to drive the growth of your organization, you want to be able to invest in them.
Yeah, and to add to that, if there are some really key business goals that are very similar to what Grace you were saying, attached to this person, they're probably gonna be more full-time. They're just gonna be much more invested. Like they are part of your business. Again, we are not full-time. So like kind of emotionally speaking, or our full attention is not going to be with you. And that's just the nature of it. So thinking through how critical that person is for where you are in your stage.
So I want to thank everybody for this lively discussion that we're having here today. And if you want to get in touch with any of these phenomenal fractional leaders, we are on the Startup Boston page, and you can reach out, or we'll be here for a few minutes after this session. And I just want to say thank you to Startup Boston and to Suffolk University for hosting us. This has been a phenomenal, and it's great to know that we're out there. So feel free to reach out and link in with me. I'd love to connect with you. If anybody has any HR questions, feel free. Have a great day. Thank you again, panel.
Wonderful.
My friend, you actually someone
Yeah.
right now.
If I could just have a moment of everybody's time. Testing, testing. Just a moment of everybody's time before we disperse. Thank you so much. So again, thank you to our wonderful panelists. We have a lot more in store both today and for the rest of the week. We've got a career fair kicking off tonight at 6 p.m. right here at Suffolk University. Now, in this room specifically, the next session will be building your brand, how to attract talent as an early stage startup. If that's not what you are looking for, you will need to change rooms. And for our folks at the registration desk, they can help you get to where you need to be next. Lastly, Kevin Ty from 3 Circle Studios is our photography partner for Startup Boston Week. So definitely make sure when you see him, you have him snap a photo, because then you could download your own personalized album of Startup Boston Week to take it with you and remember for all the years to come. Important note, any virtual attendees, if your next panel session is in this room, you can stay right here where you are logged in. It will be kicking off. Otherwise, thank you all again. Feel free to make introductions, connect, go forth, and enjoy Startup Boston Week. Thank you.